Hi friends, and welcome back to another video. Today I am doing my September wrap up. So I'm just going to start off by saying September definitely, not that I necessarily totally planned my reading, but I had that series and that standalone September that I want to take part in, not take part in, but just do as a challenge for myself. And I wasn't super successful in that front, but I did read 12 books, which is impressive for me. However, a lot of them, it was just a month of mediocre reads. Like, some of them were good, some of them were bad. A lot of them were just so-so, you know. So yeah, that was kind of like an overview of how I felt September's reading went. Just before I forget, kind of what I'm hoping to do for October is the Vampathon, which is the last week of October, hosted by Jodie, I believe, where you read a lot of spooky books. So I have my TBR set out, but you have like a post set in talking about those, so I think I'm just going to share it to Instagram. I don't know, we'll see, I don't know. Loads of different prompts to kind of, you know, cater your reading around Halloween-y kind of books. They don't have to be scary, so yeah, I'm going to take part in that. That looks really fun. And also I want to take part in Read a Book Gem's Wuthering Heights read-along. So the classic gothic vibe of it, I think that would fit for one of the prompts for the Vampathon as well. So yeah, and that one's just like a month-long read-along, dip in and out whenever you want. So yeah, those are my sort of loose plans for the month of October. Let's get back into what I read during September. So, as I say, I read a total of 12 books in the month, and let's see, I had 1 fantasy, 3 sci-fi, 4 non-fiction, memoir or poetry, 1 historical, and 1 mystery, thriller or horror. There were pretty much 11 out of the 12 books were contemporary in time, and 2 of those were YA, 1 was middle grade, and 9, yeah, I think 9 was adult, classed as adult. And that's interesting for me because I don't tend to read a lot of adult aimed books, but here we are. 2 of the books in terms of sources were loaned, so from the library this time round. 11 of them I'd already hauled recently. 1 of them was on my TBR for 2+ years. 4 were backlist books, so they were released 2 years ago or older. 8 were new releases from 2020 onwards, and in terms of format, all of them were your standard physical books. So I didn't read any ebooks or listen to any audiobooks or anything like that this month. So let's get into the books. I had a couple of buddy reads as well, so I'll tell you guys about those when they come. So starting off with a trilogy that I'm in the middle of reading. So I picked up the first in that one, and this is the first library book that I borrowed, and that is The Book of Coley by M.R. Carey, and this I gave a 2.5 stars. So this one released in April 2020 on the 14th, I believe. From what I've looked up, each of these books in the trilogy were released like 6 months after each other, so that's a lot of work, and I applaud the author for that. It was released by Orbit, and it's classed as like adult science fiction. So, how do I explain this world? It's kind of post-apocalyptic, and we're following the events of the life of Coley, who is this character who grows up in this very kind of small, sheltered, so to speak, a village where everybody kind of looks at technology, tech they call it, as this thing to be worshipped. They are heavily protected by the very small amount of technology that has awoken, that works for them, and that is what protects them from basically everything outside of their little village. The trees can kill, there's like these crazy monster like animals that can kill, like everything that breathes is trying to eat you basically. So yeah, it's interesting because it takes concepts of like what could happen to the world if climate change really carries on at the speed that it's carrying on, but in a science fiction kind of fantastical way. So yeah, it says here, beyond the walls of small village of Mythenrood lies an unrecognisable landscape, a place where overgrown forests are filled with choker trees and deadly seeds that will kill you where you stand, and if they don't get you, the shunned men will. Coley has lived in Mythenrood his entire life. He believes the first rule of survival is that you don't venture too far beyond the walls. he's wrong. So yeah, it is literally an account of his life. So the pros I would say for this book is that it was definitely an interesting concept. Like, I picked it up because the cover was very intriguing, and reading the back about, like, just kind of getting the vibe of post-apocalyptic civilization, Britain in specific, as well as themes of the devotion that they had to this old tech and the wielders of the tech, was fascinating. I wanted to know more, and also it gave me that this idea of sort of a cult mentality around it. So yeah, those sort of things intrigue me. But I found this sounds awfully harsh, but I found it boring. I couldn't get a good picture in my mind, and I don't know if that's to do with how the characters talk, because a lot of their language is limited now. They've lost the old ways, which is our present sort of thing. So a lot of the education and a lot of terminologies and just speech is just reverted back a little bit. So the way he was describing some things that might have been obvious to us, it took me a while, or not at all, to gather what he was talking about. Because interesting and clever that the author can make him, like, can pick apart a simple thing and try and get a character to see it through eyes that don't understand what he's looking at. That's clever, but as a reader looking at that, it just made it an extra layer of confusion, because half the time I couldn't decipher what Coley was looking at. And if it had been in straightforward English as we know today, I probably would have, you know, clicked on easier than I was. So there's that. I really wished we'd had got more conversation on the downfall of the old world, the global warming, all those kind of scientific based reasoning for this setup. I feel like just kind of having that explanation would have immersed me more in the story. So for those reasons, I gave this a 2.5 stars. But you might be surprised to find out that I have in fact continued with the trilogy. We'll get to that shortly. The next read I finished during September was a buddy read with Gemma from Read a Book Gem, and that was Mr. Loverman by Bernadina Veristo. This one I ended up giving a 3.5 stars out of 5. It was released in 2013. I think this is a reprinted cover, and it is adult fiction by Penguin Random House UK. So we are following Barry, who has been basically hiding his sexuality for the whole of his life, like for the 74 years, yeah, of his life, which, you know, is saying something. He's been married for a lot of that time, unhappily. Both him and his wife are not happy together, but they've sort of just stayed together for, you know, the vows and the promise they made. But it's becoming more, like, increasingly difficult for Barry to kind of feel like he can keep this ruse up. His wife knows that he's been cheating, but she doesn't realise the extent of his cheating has been with his best friend Morris. So there's a lot that could potentially be unpacked and explode, and it could explode in this story. I could not help but, despite all his wrongs, the unfaithfulness, everything, I could not help but be utterly charmed by Barry. He just was such an endearing character. I loved reading about his shenanigans, although I did not agree with what he was doing because he was cheating. You know, I just couldn't help but fall in love with him as a character and really enjoy reading from his point of view. It was very easy to read and quite unexpectedly light-hearted. You would have thought maybe something with these themes could have been a bit more, I don't know, harder to digest, because another layer of it is being gay in the older generation of the Caribbean. So there's a lot of things that could be discussed around that. So yeah, it was a cool topic again about sexuality within the older generation of the Caribbean scene. So I liked those. But I would say, aside from Barry, there were a lot of dislikable characters, and I totally understand that it's needed in a story to have a couple of unlikable characters, because it builds it up, it gives it layers, complexity, it makes it more believable. But oh my gosh, I couldn't stand, like, the daughters in this, the wife I didn't like there were so many passing friends that I was like, why are you interfering? It's like, it's just none of your business, and it just irritated me. So obviously that was a slog to get through because I couldn't stand some of the characters that I was hearing about. Again, as I say, Barry is cheating. He is being what do you say? His infidelity, basically. He's being infidel. No, you don't say that, do you? his infidelity. It was really hard to read about because it's a horrible thing, and the fact that his wife knew that something was going on all this time, it's just not nice to read about. I also wanted it to be deeper. As I said, I wanted that more of that conversation about how he felt coming out, especially so late in life. I wanted a little bit more depth. I feel like it missed a little bit there for me. But yes, 3.5 stars. Time for a short juice break because my throat is positively rasping. Oh god. The next one, it's a confusing one because I don't know if I can say I'm disappointed because I sort of didn't really know what I was going into. So it was just an okay read, and that is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, which is translated from Spanish by Megan McDowell. This one, I gave it 3 stars, and it released this year in this country in this translation, and I'd say it's like adult horror published by Granta. Beautiful book though, absolutely stunning. I feel like that would be such a cool tattoo design or like a print to hang up. I think that's absolutely gorgeous. Anyway, that's beside the point. This is a collection of short like vignettes, short stories, centering around creepy happenings in like Barcelona, other cities of Spain that I don't know because geography is definitely not my strong point, but I think quite the majority of them are set in Barcelona. I'm pretty sure there was quite a few stories set there. I might be wrong. Anyway, I sound so ignorant. I do apologise. Yeah, and a lot of it is child-based. There's a lot of dark, gritty, dirty descriptions. Yeah, it's an interesting kind of horror, I would say. So I was absolutely engrossed by the recurring themes of disappeared children. I feel like that was very heavily used throughout all of these stories, if not all, the majority. That seemed to be a running theme. So I'm wondering what the history is in Spain with missing children and like the disappeared, as they called them, if that's a thing, because as I say, geography and all that sort of stuff, I don't know, so I was not aware. But I really liked that inclusion. It just felt really eerie. I feel like children in horror is frightening at the best of times, but when they're disappeared and then you see them in places when you know they've been confirmed dead, or do you know what I mean, or they've been confirmed as disappeared at this age and you see them again years later but at that same age, like frozen in time. Freaky. I liked that. I liked the eerie, atmospheric vibe of this. It done all of that so well. It definitely made me uncomfortable. But I also feel like, in a negative light, it made me uncomfortable. I think it was just too extreme for me. I don't know. There was just something about it that was very off-putting at the same time as being intriguing. And there was so many like disgusting descriptions. Not my kind of horror, I don't think, because it was like the way they described like feces and it just made me feel uncomfortable, like I wanted to gag. So yeah, a little bit of a disappointment, but also, can I call it a disappointment if I didn't really know what I was going into? Do you know what I mean? It was an alright read. I would be intrigued to check out the author's other works. We shall see. Okay, so as I said, I continued on with the Rampant trilogy with book 2, The Trials of Coley, again by M.R. Carey. And yet again, I gave this a 2.5 stars. So this one, as I said, 6 monthly intervals or so abouts, or thereabouts. This was released on the 15th of September 2020. And it's adult sci-fi by Orbit, already said that. So continuing on with the story, obviously don't want to talk too much about the actual plot of this because it will majorly spoil the first book. If I've not scared you off and you are interested in reading it yourself, yeah, obviously don't want to spoil you. But I will say, I get to see a little bit more outside of Myth and Rude, so I enjoyed exploring more of the world generally and kind of seeing how hard global climate change had hit the rest, like the wider world of this world. I enjoyed having a new perspective to read from. There was 2 point of views in this one. It definitely helped to break up Coley's kind of unending monologue. In this, there's a character, she was in the first book, but you have more more input from them in this one, and I just feel like the diversity there didn't feel genuine for me. At least not enough. It felt like, I feel awful saying this, but it felt like a token character. And reading the third book now, currently, they are using, like, they are building upon her more than just that, but it feels like they're really stretching it and kind of just putting it in to say, oh look, we've added this into this story now. I don't know, I'm being really coy about it, but there was just something about that didn't feel genuine for me, like almost like they were just ticking boxes. I don't know. Again, bored. Everything that should have been exciting, engaging, it just didn't work for me. It just fell flat. And although I appreciated the new perspective, as I mentioned earlier, it was very repetitive. The information that Cody had already told us, even in the first book, let alone in this book, they were repeating from their perspective, but it wasn't a lot of difference. So yeah, 2.5 stars. I bet you're wondering, Jen, why are you reading the third book? Well, I bought them all out of the library. Not bought, sorry, I borrowed them. They're there. I'm a little bit of a completionist in some things, and I don't know how to DNF things apparently. Anyway, on to the next book. That's this cute little one. I've got a couple of little ones now. That is Navigate Your Stars by Jesmyn Ward, which I gave a 5 stars. Oh, I realised this could have been my favourite book. Hey ho, never mind. This released in 2020, non-fiction YA by Bloomsbury. I hadn't read anything by this author before, but I have a copy on my Kindle of Sing Unburied to Sing, I think. I'm pretty sure I do. Somewhere in all those documents. Anyway, this is a tiny little, cute, beautiful, empowering book on a speech that Jesmyn Ward had made, and it's just kind of typed up, put together with some lovely illustrations. I've showed you the same page. Jesmyn Ward grew up in a poor rural community in Mississippi. Today, as the first woman to win the National Book Award twice, she is celebrated as one of America's greatest living writers. This is a stirring reflection on the value of hard work and the importance of respect for yourself and others. It's beautifully illustrated and it's profound and meditative Why can't I say that? It is a profound and meditative book that will inspire all readers preparing for the next chapter in their lives. So yes, this one was just really beautiful, really inspiring, really tiny. That's that. Another small book, as I mentioned, I have Almost Midnight by Rainbow Rowell, illustrated by Simone Blocker. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Nope, lies. 4.5 out of 5 stars. This released in 2017 as this like bind up, but inside this it's 2 short stories of Midnight and Kindred Spirits, and they released at different times, different years. This is romance contemporary YA published by Macmillan. So as I said, it contains 2 short stories in here, 2 festive short stories. I'd already read Kindred Spirits because it was a World Book Day release like 5 years ago or so, but Midnight I hadn't read before. So, and to be fair, with Kindred Spirits I felt like I couldn't remember a lot about it anyway, but anyway. This was super sweet, very wholesome, very lovely illustrations. It's basically, the Midnight's one is a romance between 2 friends, and you kind of see snippets of their nights together as their relationship gets stronger, perhaps. I don't know. Every like almost midnight on New Year's Eve. And then with Kindred Spirits, it's about the latest Star Wars movie coming out, and it's following a girl in the line waiting for the release and kind of learning a bit more about herself, making friends, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think my con for that is I have no interest in Star Wars, and I'm pretty sure I said this before when I read the book originally, the Kindred Spirits one. But I could still appreciate the love of a fandom, you know. Rightio, next buddy read. I read with Kat's Reading Corner the next book in the Land of Stories series, and that is An Author's Odyssey by Chris Colfer, and I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This was released in 2016, middle grade fantasy by Little Brown and Company. I have spoken so much about this series, so I'm not going to give another synopsis, but this was so much fun, very fast paced, but too repetitive. Keeping that one short and sweet. Some of these books as well I have talked about. I think these next 4 I've spoken about in a reading vlog. I might have included some of these in a reading vlog as well. yeah, I will link relevant videos around. So these next lot I will whiz through a little bit. So Kew Gardens, author is Victoria. Why did I write Victoria? I meant Virginia Woolf. I gave this one a 3.5 stars. Released in 2017 as this edition, but it was originally released in 1921. It is adult classic historical, published by Kew Publishing. And this is a short story, or a collection again of short stories. It's just kind of snippets of lives of people strolling through Kew Gardens, and you get little bits of their conversations as they're enjoying their day. It's very charming. I enjoyed flitting in and out of the passerbys' conversations, and I really enjoyed the little illustrations. However, I expected there to be more and varied illustrations, but they're quite, like, they're repeated throughout, and there's not many of them. They're quite small, but they're cute anyway. There was a lot of run-on sentences that I feel like didn't need to be a thing. Next up, I read this beautiful big, like, coffee table book, and that is by Billie Eilish. This one I gave it 5 stars. It released this year. Non-fiction autobiography, published by Wren and Rook, and it's basically a picture book. It's kind of like a scrapbook memory photo album of all of Billie's, like, moments that she's proud of and happy of and just wanted to share. So there's times of, like, her concerts, when her album released, also when she was, like, growing up with her brother. So cute. Yeah, I absolutely loved everything about this. It was very wholesome, very sweet, and it's something that I'll probably flick through every now and then. Oh boy, this one. Allen Ginsberg's Howl, Kaddish and Other Poems. As I say, I've already got a reading vlog, so if you want more in-depth thoughts, definitely check that out. I gave this one a 1 star. It released between 1956 and 1961 because these are a collection of selected poems put together in this edition. So some of the poems were originally written or released in a different collection at different points in time. Yeah, it's a classic poetry adult collection published by Penguin Modern Classics, and I didn't really like anything about this. I feel awful, but it just went over my head. I didn't really get anything. I felt confused and not well versed enough to really dissect and analyse the themes that it might have been displaying and presented, and I couldn't appreciate what it was doing because of that. So yeah, maybe it's just too experimental for me in feel, kind of like with the Danger of Smoking in Bed short stories. And yeah, it's just a style of poetry for me that doesn't work, unfortunately. But that's okay. We move. Random little one here now, but I made a listing for it on Goodreads, and that is Bond Over Bondage by Pulse and Cocktails. And I gave this a 3 stars. I just wrote that it released this year. I couldn't find an actual date for it or anything like that. Non-fiction, adult, published by Cocktails Limited, and it's basically what it says. It's a book about bondage. It is pretty much kind of like a catalogue of stuff. I went in a sex shop with my friend and got this, and yeah, so it's got like advertisements in the middle, but it actually has quite good information on, like, beginner bondage, I guess you'd say. It's quite informative and fun, and had more information than I was expecting. So yeah, it was an interesting read nonetheless. Okay, and the last book I read was Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I probably pronounced that so wrong, I'm so sorry. I gave this one a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It released this year by Faber and Faber, and it's science fiction adult. So we are following Clara, who is an artificial friend, and you follow her. It's split into like 5 or 6 parts, and you're basically following her as she observes the world from her shop window, waiting to be chosen by a teenager to be their artificial friend. And it was a strange one. It was a really odd read. I did enjoy the artificial intelligence perspective. I do find that sort of thing quite fascinating to learn about, so especially with Clara being so observant, like, it was cool to see how she took things in and her thought process of it, so I liked that. And it was a great character study. It's a very slow moving story, and for a lot of the time it feels like there's really no plot, and there isn't a massive plot really, but the characters there were quite interesting to look into, you know. It did leave me feeling quite sad, quite melancholy. I feel like it needed some more explanations on the terms that it was using. It was almost like you were dumped into this world already knowing where we were, how far in the future we were, where it was set, and like there was words like lifted, which I came to assume I knew what it meant eventually with just trying to piece together things, but that would have been really helpful to just know what that term meant at the beginning. At first I thought it was kind of using it as like a surprise tactic to be like, oh, what's lifted? Intrigued, I want to know what this is about, but they just never kind of properly gave you a definition of it. So you was left to your own devices. And also, thinking about it too, the characters didn't speak like, they didn't feel real in their speech. Like, it just felt very either overly formal or in a way that people naturally wouldn't talk. And I'm not even talking about the AIs, I'm talking about like the people. So that was a strange tactic to use. I don't know what that was about, but yes, 3.5 stars. I've been wanting to read The Buried Giant, I think it's called, and also The Remains of the Day, but yeah, I'm still intrigued to give those a go at some point. And my favourite book that wasn't really a favourite, but it was the, I don't know, it's one of the better books that I read because it was quite a mediocre reading month, was An Author's Odyssey, which was that Land of Stories book. So yes, that is it for this wrap up. Oh my god, my throat is on fire talking for so much. I will leave it there for now. Let me know what you were reading during September, your favourite, your least favourite book, that sort of thing. If you've read any of these books, you know, the usual. I will catch you in another video soon. Bye.
Started as a